Welcome to the JT Sports Podcast. If you live, eat, breathe, and sleep football, this is the right place for you. We're talking NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you love the NFL and college football just as much as I do, this is the right place for you. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content. I want to double back to the Raiders' decision to fire Antonio Pierce because it's really weird as hell to me how the NFL media is trying to make this about race when the decision to fire Antonio Pierce had nothing to do with race. What they don't want to bring up is how the Raiders had a projected over-under win total coming into this season of 6.5 wins. That was more than the Broncos and the Carolina Panthers, who both were projected at 5.5 wins. The Broncos were supposed to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. Many people thought that the Raiders were going to be better than Denver this year because Denver, like the Raiders, didn't have that good of a roster. Most of y'all can't even name 3 players on the Broncos offense and probably 3 on their defense as well, other than Patrick Surtain and Bo Nix. That's about all the guys that you can name, and maybe Courtland Sutton. That's about it. But yet, you got people that want to make excuses for Antonio Pierce, saying that, well, he didn't have a quarterback. Okay, he couldn't get Jaden Daniels, but they had the same opportunity as what the Minnesota Vikings did to sign Sam Darnold. Why didn't they do it? They went with Gardner Minshew instead. Nobody in the NFL media is talking about how Antonio Pierce made one of the worst offensive coordinator hirings during the offseason, deciding to hire Luke Getsy, who had just got fired by the Chicago Bears for how disastrous his play calling was. And many Bears fans blame him for why Justin Fields' final season in the Windy City was a major disappointment. And by the time we got to the middle portion of this season, Antonio Pierce had cleaned house with pretty much the entirety of his offensive staff. He fired Luke Getsy, he fired his offensive line coach, and he fired other guys on the offensive staff as well. And there were so many games this year that the Raiders lost, not due to not having enough talent, but due to poor situational football. The Raiders lost several one-possession games this year due to poor clock management from Antonio Pierce. Also, him deciding to be conservative in a lot of fourth down situations when he should have been more aggressive and rolled the dice and gone for it in those situations. How about all of the special teams mishaps, the self-inflicted errors that they had, like when they lost to the Chiefs in that Black Friday game because of the botch exchange between Aiden O'Connell and the center? When you constantly find ways to lose games in the fashion that the Raiders had this season, it's an indication that you don't have a good coach. The NFL is a league that doesn't care about the color of your skin as long as you're able to win games. If you're winning, nobody cares if you're black, white, or orange. It's a production-based business. That's what people don't want to admit about this league. They just want to find a way to make this a racial thing when this isn't anything to do with race. Brian Flores, remember how bad of a team he inherited his first season in Miami? They wanted him to tank and he refused to do so, and that team overachieved. He was a black head coach. He didn't get canned after 1 year. He was able to elevate that team. If you are a good coach, you're able to elevate the players on your roster. Being the head coach is like being a chess player. Everybody that plays chess has to access to the same chess pieces. But the better chess player you are, the better you can position your pawns to win the game. And when you're a good head coach, you can find a way to get the most out of your players, to put them in position to succeed so you can win games. Mike Tomlin has been overachieving for 5 years straight. No good quarterback, an inconsistent offensive line, and yet he hasn't been fired. You can say what you want to about Mike Tomlin not being able to win the playoffs. Once you get to the postseason, you got to have a quarterback. You just have to. But for Antonio Pierce, He doesn't get any sympathy from me. You lost to Andy Dalton, man. Are we forgetting this? Are we forgetting how Andy Dalton, as soon as he got the starting nod in favor of Bryce Young, was just throwing dots on Antonio Pierce's defense, and this brother is supposed to be a defensive-minded head coach. I'm tired of these NFL media outlets trying to make this something that it's not. Stop freaking race baiting, man. Why can't we just accept that some brothers are good head coaches and some brothers just don't have what it takes to be a head coach at this level? There are only 32 head coaching jobs available in the National Football League. That's less than 1% of the population that has the opportunity to get one of these exclusive jobs. Tom Brady is the minority owner of the Raiders now, and Mark Davis is leaning on him heavily when it comes to these coaching decisions and personnel decisions. Tom Brady, for the majority of his career, played under one of the greatest head coaches ever, and Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was a master at understanding and preparing his team for any situation during the game, which is why they were so dominant during their 2 decades together in Foxborough, because Bill Belichick understood situational football. You didn't see the Patriots under Bill Belichick lose games the way that Antonio Pierce was losing games for the Raiders this season. And also, during his run as the interim head coach, 4 out of 5 of his wins came against teams that had backup quarterbacks. The only win that he got that wasn't against a backup quarterback was when they got that Christmas miracle against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And the offense ain't even do anything in that game. The defense carried the load. They kind of lucked up with that one. You know, I can understand if this was a situation like Brian Flores. You know, you had a black head coach that went 9-8 in his first season, and then in his second season, he does it again and gets canned because the organization wanted him to tank, and then they forced him to draft a quarterback that he never wanted. I can understand that. I don't want to come on here and make it seem like racism in the NFL doesn't exist, but when it comes to the decision of firing Antonio Pierce, I don't see that being the case. I just see this as a situation where Mark Davis and Tom Brady understood that this guy wasn't the right head coach to lead the Raiders to success. And the only reason why Mark Davis even gave AP the full-time head coaching job in the first place, in my opinion, was because he had fear that he would make the same mistake that he did a few years ago, not retaining Rich Bisaccia after he led them to the playoffs, in spite of everything that that team had to overcome that year, with John Gruden having to resign due to the leaked emails that came out. A few weeks later, Henry Ruggs gets into that fatal car accident that takes the life of a woman, and now he's doing several years in jail, and yet they came a goal line stand short of being able to send that game against Cincinnati in the overtime. And who knows what happens if they get it in the OT. And the Bengals went on to be the runner-ups in the Super Bowl that same season. And yet, instead of keeping Rich Bisaccia, Mark Davis opted to hire Josh McDaniels. And if he could have went back and redid that decision, he probably gives Bisaccia the job instead of McDaniels. And with him already making that mistake with the interim head coach that was able to turn the season around, get the players in the entire locker room to rally behind them, he probably didn't want to feel like he was going to make that same mistake twice, which is why he gave AP the opportunity that he did. But the team got worse. The team wasn't that good last year, and yet they won 8 games. You were good enough to beat the Carolina Panthers. I don't want to hear no freaking excuses about the quarterback situation. I would have took Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew over Andy Dalton and Bryce Young at the time, because Bryce Young was looking like one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history before he ended up getting the starting job back. You know, Andy Dalton torched that defense, and I picked the Raiders to win that game. I lost money betting on the Raiders to win that game. So don't come to me with this whole nonsense about black head coaches don't get a fair rep in the NFL. There are plenty of black coaches right now that are thriving because they're winning. Todd Bowles, he doesn't have to worry about getting fired. You want to know why? Because he wins games. He got fired when he was the former head coach of the New York Jets, and yet he led them to one of the best seasons that they've had in recent memory. When's the last time the Jets won 10 games? Since they had Todd Bowles as the head coach. What about Mike Tomlin? You know, I get it that the NFL doesn't have a lot of disparity when it comes to African-American head coaches in the league compared to whites. But let's not make it seem like every black coach that gets fired after one season was the next best thing smoking. Because Antonio Pierce, it was pretty apparent if you watched the Raiders play this year, this was a poorly coached football team. He was learning on the job. He didn't really have that many years of experience anyway as an assistant head coach. I'm tired of people making this decision something that it's not. This doesn't have a doggone thing to do about race. Everybody, when somebody gets fired and they're black, they're quick to make it a racial issue instead of zooming out, controlling their emotions, and just being able to accept that this brother just wasn't that good. You know, the Steve Wilkes situation, when he got fired by the Arizona Cardinals, I felt like, you know, that was a little bit racially motivated. But at the end of the day, it's still a production-based business. And if you want to keep your job, you got to win. We've seen plenty of coaches in Antonio Pierce, same situation, like Brian Flores down in Miami, do more with less. Tired of this crap about, another black coach gets an unfair rep. How about you win some doggone games? Beat the Carolina Panthers. Beat the Denver Broncos. Tired of hearing this nonsense.